I actually heard from a source in Iraq around a week ago after Israel first attacked Iranian nuclear infrastructure. And they said that they were hearing Iranian-backed militia in Iraq were already mobilising with a plan to respond to this action by Israel, and were looking to target US assets in Iraq. Now, there's been, of course, no evidence of that yet. But that is the big concern.
The US has bombed key nuclear sites in Iran overnight. In a national address from the White House, President Trump has warned that Iran must make peace or future attacks will be far greater. God bless the Middle East is what the president said in his address from the White House. So then, what is the big picture plan? We're trying to piece together what happens next. Let's speak to Sally Lockwood, journalist and broadcaster who hosts the State of the World show on YouTube and was a long-term foreign correspondent as well. Sally joins us from Dubai. Good morning, Sally.
Morning, Callum.
We must consider, I think, the position that we went into this escalation in. And by that I mean where allies of Iran, allies of Israel, where nations around the Middle East had positioned themselves before US involvement, so that we can then establish where they may come down on it now. So where did we go into this?
Yeah, Callum. So around 20 Arab and Muslim nations came out publicly, either in joint statements or individual statements, after Israel first attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, strongly condemning Israel's actions. And that's because anything that threatens regional stability in the Middle East is condemned, even if many of those countries, if not all, don't want to see a nuclear Iran. They privately might welcome Iran being weakened, but they certainly don't want anything that could lead to regional instability, because that would have enormous economic and security implications for them. So I think when we hear publicly, probably later on today, from some of these countries, I think we can expect that they will once again call for a peaceful resolution. They'll call for a de-escalation and a return to diplomacy.
One of the concerns from allies of Iran, or at least friendly nations to Iran, is that actually some of them will have US military bases in them. And if Iran's retaliation focuses on nearby US military bases, then in some way that will affect their own sovereign territory as well, which could put them in a particularly tricky situation.
Yeah, 100%, Callum. I mean, this is the huge regional concern, is that America has around 40,000 military personnel in the region. They have a number of air bases, military infrastructure. You just need to look at Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi, here, the UAE, of course, Iraq. And I guess it's just waiting to see how Iran reacts. Will they target US assets in the region? And if they do, where will that be? Now, no country wants to see this conflict spill over into a wider regional war, but that is, of course, the paramount concern here. I actually heard from a source in Iraq around a week ago after Israel first attacked Iranian nuclear infrastructure, and they said that they were hearing Iranian-backed militia in Iraq were already mobilising with a plan to respond to this action by Israel, and were looking to target US assets in Iraq. Now, there's been, of course, no evidence of that yet, but that is the big concern.
Just to bring you this as well, that the Israeli military says that its air force has just begun a new wave of attacks against military targets in western Iran. This follows news that we were bringing in the last hour of missiles being launched from Iran towards Israel. So the Israel Defense Force, saying it's carried out strikes against missile launchers in Iranian territory. And with that in mind, Sally, the concept here, the principle here, was to knock out Iran's nuclear capability. President Trump says that has happened, but it is apparent in the immediate aftermath that has not stopped Israel from taking its own action as well, which I suppose, however low level it had been a hope here that a US involvement would open the door to a diplomatic solution.
Yeah, of course. That's what we don't know yet, is we don't know whether this involvement by the US is going to bring a swifter resolution to what's happening in terms of Israel's war with Iran, or whether it's going to cause escalation. That is the concern. But very interesting that Israel is also attacking Iranian defense infrastructure and military infrastructure. This hasn't just been limited to nuclear facilities. And that, I guess, the hope is that that will weaken Iran. It will stop the attacks on Israel and minimize any risk of Iran also attacking other nations. They've certainly been significantly weakened since Israel started this war in the last week and a bit. And I think everything has been moving quite quickly. And it's worth remembering that there are a number of parties that are very interested in what's happening here. Of course, Middle Eastern nations don't want to see this spread into a wider conflict. There's citizens from around the world who live in the Middle East who are very concerned, who've been following this war very closely. I received text messages already this morning from people really worried. You know, when Donald Trump came out and said, I'm not going to make a decision for 2 weeks as to whether the US is going to get involved in Israeli action in Iran, that certainly lowered the temperature, and it brought a sense of reassurance to people here. There was a slight sigh of relief. Someone spoke to me about it yesterday saying, I feel slightly less concerned about the war. I was thinking about returning home for the summer early. And then, of course, this news this morning has created that concern once again. And I would say people here in the region are actively anxious about how this is going to unfold.
Yeah. In terms of the impact of this, it's, I suppose, quite difficult to determine what the actual impact has been. So President Trump says nuclear facilities obliterated. Iran's nuclear energy organisation saying nuclear development will not be stopped by these attacks. Just explain to us, Sally, how we will get definitive information about where Iran's nuclear programme is left as a result of these strikes.
I guess we're going to have to rely on experts like the IAEA, the UN nuclear watchdog, for definitive information. But I would say as well that countries in the Gulf here and in Iraq are also monitoring radiation levels. There's a lot of concern about the spread of contamination, what this could mean for people in the wider region. Now, so far, experts have said any risk of contamination is extremely low, but there is one active nuclear plant in Iran, the Bushehr nuclear plant. Now, the Israelis came out and said that that had been hit in the last week, and then corrected their information to say, in fact, that was wrong and it hadn't been hit. But the IAEA has said that if that were to be hit, then that would have serious consequences, and there could be a spread of contamination for hundreds of kilometers. And that's something else that people here are talking about and are very concerned about. No one wants to see a major nuclear catastrophe unfold in this region.
Yes.
And there's no suggestion yet that that is going to happen. But of course, that is something that's being monitored very closely.